The alarm bells rang through the Space Defense Command Center like nothing Jake Morrison had ever heard before. He ran down the metal hallway, his boots making loud sounds on the floor. Other people in uniforms were running too, all heading to the main control room. Jake pushed open the heavy doors and saw dozens of people staring at the big screens on the walls. The screens showed space, but something was different. There were lights where no lights should be. "Commander Morrison, you need to see this," called out Dr. Lisa Carter from across the room. She was standing next to a computer that was making beeping sounds. Lisa was the smartest person Jake knew when it came to studying alien life, even though they had never found any aliens before today. Jake walked over to Lisa and looked at her computer screen. Numbers and symbols were moving across it very fast. "What am I looking at, Doc?" "It's a message," Lisa said, her voice shaking a little. "From space, from something that is not from Earth." Jake felt his stomach drop. For his whole life, people had wondered if there was life on other planets. Now they had their answer, and it was calling Earth directly. "Can you understand what it says?" Jake asked. Lisa pressed some buttons on her computer. "I've been working on it for the past hour." The message is using math and pictures to talk to us. It's very smart. Like whoever sent it knew we might not understand their language. The big screens in the room suddenly changed. Instead of showing space, they now showed the face of something that was definitely not human. It looked like it was made of clear crystal, with light moving through it like water. When it spoke, the words came out in perfect English. "People of Earth, I am Ambassador Vex of the Geltori race. We are part of something called the Galactic Coalition. We need to talk to you about something very important." Everyone in the room became very quiet. Jake could hear his own heart beating. He looked around and saw that every person was staring at the screen with their mouth open. Ambassador Vex continued talking. "Your planet has been watched by us for some time. We know you are smart and that you can build things that fly in space. This is why we are talking to you now, when time is running out." "Running out? For what?" Jake asked out loud, even though he knew the alien could not hear him, as if answering his question. Ambassador Vex said, "There is great danger coming to this part of space. An enemy called the Kreth Empire is moving toward your solar system. They destroy planets and use the people they kill to make their army bigger and stronger." The screen changed to show pictures of space battles. Jake saw huge ships that looked like they were made of metal and bone fighting against other ships. The metal and bone ships were winning every fight. "The Kreth have already destroyed 17 worlds," Ambassador Vex said. "Each time they win a battle, they take the bodies of the people they killed and turn them into new soldiers. They also steal the ideas and technology from the people they beat. This makes them harder to stop each time." Lisa grabbed Jake's arm. "Commander, if what this alien is saying is true, we're in serious trouble." Jake nodded. He had spent his whole career training to protect Earth from other countries, not from aliens who could turn dead people into soldiers. Ambassador Vex spoke again. "The Galactic Coalition has 12 different alien races working together. We have been keeping peace in space for over 1,000 of your years. But the Kreth are too strong for us to stop alone. So what do you want from us?" Jake asked the screen. "We offer your planet a chance to join the coalition. If you say yes, we will try to protect Earth when the Kreth arrive. But we must be honest with you. Your planet has only 8 billion people, and you live on just one world. Most of our member planets have much bigger populations spread across many worlds." The crystal alien paused, and Jake could see light moving faster through its body, like it was thinking hard about something. "The other members of the coalition think that Earth cannot help much in this war. They believe your people will be defeated quickly when the Kreth arrive. Some think we should not waste time trying to save your world." Jake felt angry. These aliens were basically saying that humans were too weak to matter in their war. However, Ambassador Vex continued, "I believe all life is worth saving, so I will make you this deal. You have 3 months to show that Earth can help fight the Kreth. If you can prove that humans are strong enough to make a difference, the coalition will accept Earth as a full member and protect your world. If you cannot prove this, we will." Leave before the Kreth arrive, and Earth will face them alone. The screen went black, and the room became very quiet again. Jake looked around at all the people staring at him, waiting for him to say something. He was in charge of protecting Earth, but how could anyone protect the whole planet from aliens who could turn dead enemies into new soldiers? Dr. Carter, Jake said, I need you to study everything we just learned about these Kreth. Find out how they fight and how they make new soldiers from dead bodies. Lisa nodded. I'll start right away, Commander. Jake turned to face the room full of people. Everyone else, I want reports on every weapon, ship, and soldier we have. We need to know exactly what Earth can use to fight these aliens. A young officer raised her hand. Commander Morrison, what if we can't prove we're strong enough? What if the coalition leaves us alone to fight the Kreth? Jake thought about the question. 8 billion people on one planet against an enemy that had already destroyed 17 worlds. The math did not look good for humanity. Then we'll have to find a way to win anyway, Jake said, because giving up is not a choice. After everyone left the room, Jake stood alone looking at the big screens that now showed the stars again. Somewhere out there, an alien army was heading toward Earth. They had weapons and technology that humans had never seen. They could take dead bodies and make them fight again. Every time they won a battle, they became stronger. But Jake had spent enough time around humans to know one thing. People were very good at surviving when things looked impossible. Humans had lived through ice ages, diseases, wars, and disasters that should have killed everyone. Every time they found a way to keep going. Jake walked over to Lisa's computer and looked at the data she was studying. The numbers and symbols that the aliens had sent were very complex, but Lisa was already starting to understand some of them. Find anything interesting yet, Doc? Jake asked. Lisa looked up from her computer. Actually, yes. These Kreth don't just steal technology from the people they defeat. They steal biological information, too. They can copy the physical abilities of different alien races and add those abilities to their own soldiers so they get stronger by fighting different types of aliens. Exactly. And Commander, there's something else. According to this data, they've never fought humans before. They don't know what our physical abilities are or how we think and fight. Jake smiled for the first time since the aliens had contacted Earth. So we have one advantage. They don't know what they're up against. Maybe, Lisa said. But Commander, we don't know what we're up against either. And we have 3 months to figure out how to fight an enemy that has been winning battles for who knows how long. Jake looked back at the screens, showing the stars. 3 months to save the world. It seemed impossible. But humans had done impossible things before. They would just have to do it again. Dr. Ben Hayes walked into the laboratory carrying a metal box that was making strange humming sounds. The box was heavy, and he had to use both hands to carry it. Inside the box was a piece of alien technology that had been found floating in space after a recent battle between the Coalition and the Kreth Empire. Lisa, you need to see this, Ben called out to Dr. Carter, who was working at a computer on the other side of the room. Lisa looked up from her screen where she had been studying the alien message for the past 2 days. What did you find, Ben? Ben carefully placed the metal box on the table and opened it. Inside was something that looked like a mix between a computer chip and a living brain. It was gray and wet, with small lights blinking inside it. This came from a destroyed Kreth ship, Ben explained. The Coalition found it and sent it to us to study. But Lisa, this thing is incredible. It's not just technology, and it's not just biology. It's both at the same time. Lisa walked over to look at the strange object. How is that possible? I've been running tests on it all night, Ben said, his eyes bright with excitement. This thing can copy information from living things and turn that information into new technology. But it's more than that. Look at this. Ben pressed a button on a machine next to the table. The machine made a beeping sound, and numbers appeared on a small screen. What am I looking at? Lisa asked. Quantum signatures, Ben said. This technology uses quantum entanglement to connect with other pieces like it across huge distances. When one piece learns something new, all the other pieces learn it too. Instantly, Lisa felt her heart beat faster. You mean they can share information faster than light? Exactly. That's how the Kreth can coordinate their forces so well. Every soldier in their army is connected to every other soldier through quantum entanglement. When one of them learns a new fighting technique, they all know it immediately. While Ben and Lisa were studying the alien technology, Lieutenant Colonel Steve Miller was getting ready for a very dangerous mission. He stood in the equipment room, putting on his spacesuit, checking every button and wire. "You sure about this, Steve?" asked Captain Amy Rogers, who was standing next to him. Amy was the best military planner on Earth, and she had helped design this mission. "Someone has to see how these Kreth actually fight," Steve said, putting on his helmet. "We can't plan a defense if we don't know what we're defending against." Steve's mission was to take a small, quiet ship to a planet called Kepler 442b, where the Coalition was trying to fight off a Kreth attack. He would hide behind the planet's moon and watch the battle, recording everything he saw. "Remember, this is just watching," Amy said. "Don't try to help and don't let them see you. We need you to come back with information." Steve nodded and walked toward his ship. It was small and painted black to be hard to see in space. The ship had special equipment that would let him record the battle from far away. The trip to Kepler 442b took Steve 3 days. When he arrived, the battle was already happening. Steve hid his ship behind the planet's moon and turned on his recording equipment. What he saw made him feel sick to his stomach. The planet below was covered in cities that were on fire. Huge Kreth ships that looked like they were made of bones and metal were shooting at buildings and people. But the worst part was what happened after the shooting stopped. The Kreth soldiers landed on the planet and began collecting the bodies of the people they had killed. But they were not just taking the bodies away. They were doing something to them right there on the battlefield. Steve watched through his camera as the dead bodies began to move again, but they were not alive. They had been turned into something else. The dead people stood up and began fighting alongside the Kreth soldiers against their own friends and family, who were still alive. "This is impossible," Steve said to himself, but he kept recording everything. The battle lasted for 6 hours. Steve watched as the Coalition ships tried to fight back. But every time they killed a Kreth soldier, 2 more soldiers were made from the bodies of the dead defenders. The Kreth were not just winning the battle, they were getting stronger while fighting it. When the battle was over, the entire planet was under Kreth control. Steve counted the ships leaving the planet. There were twice as many Kreth ships leaving as there had been when the battle started. Steve flew back to Earth as fast as his ship could go. He needed to tell Commander Morrison what he had seen. Back on Earth, Ben Hayes was making a discovery that would change everything. He had been studying the piece of Kreth technology for 5 days, and he had found something very strange. "Lisa, come look at this," Ben called out. He was standing in front of a new machine that he had built to study quantum patterns. Lisa walked over and looked at the screen. "What am I looking at, Ben?" "These are quantum signatures from the Kreth technology," Ben said, pointing at wavy lines on the screen. "But look at these other signatures." Ben pressed a button, and new wavy lines appeared on the screen. These lines looked different from the first ones, but they had the same basic pattern. "Where did these come from?" Lisa asked. "From you," Ben said. "I took a small sample of your blood and found quantum signatures in your DNA. Lisa, all humans have quantum structures in their genetic code." Lisa stared at the screen. "Are you saying that humans have the same kind of quantum abilities as the Kreth?" "Not the same, but similar," Ben said. "The quantum structures in human DNA are much more complex than what the Kreth use. It's like the Kreth are using a simple radio while humans have the equipment for a full television broadcast." Just then, Steve Miller walked into the laboratory. He looked tired and scared. "We need to talk to Commander Morrison right away," Steve said. "I've seen how the Kreth fight, and it's worse than we thought." The 3 scientists went to find Jake Morrison. They found him in the command center, looking at maps of the solar system and trying to figure out how to defend Earth. "Commander, we have some important information," Lisa said. Jake looked up from his maps. "Good news or bad news?" "Both," Steve said. "The bad news is that the Kreth don't just kill their enemies, they turn dead bodies into new soldiers. I watched them do it. Every person they killed becomes a new weapon for them to use." Jake felt his stomach drop, and the good news, Ben stepped forward. "The good news is that humans might be able to use the same technology that makes the Kreth so powerful." We have quantum structures in our DNA that could work with their systems. What does that mean exactly? Jake asked. It means we might be able to copy ourselves, Lisa said. Just like the Kreth copy the bodies of their enemies, we might be able to copy living humans. But our copies would be different. They would still be alive and they would still be human. Jake thought about this for a moment. So instead of fighting an army that gets bigger every time it wins a battle, we could have an army that gets bigger every time we need it to. Maybe, Ben said, but we would need to test it first, and we would need someone to volunteer to be the first person copied. Steve looked at the other people in the room. If it could save Earth, I'll volunteer. Jake nodded. How long would it take to build the equipment we need? A few weeks if we work day and night, Ben said. But Commander, there's something else. The quantum structures in human DNA are not like anything we've seen before. They're more advanced than what the Kreth use. If we can figure out how to use them, we might be able to do things that even the Kreth can't do. Like what? Jake asked. Like sharing memories and knowledge instantly between all of our soldiers, Lisa said. Every human copy would know everything that every other copy knows. It would be like having an army where every soldier has the experience of every other soldier. Jake looked back at his maps of the solar system. A few minutes ago, he had been trying to figure out how 8 billion humans could fight an enemy that had destroyed 17 worlds. Now, maybe there was a way for Earth to have an army as big as it needed. Get started on building the equipment, Jake said. We have 2 months left before the Kreth arrive. Let's see if we can give them a surprise they're not expecting. Commander Jake Morrison stood in front of a room full of the smartest people on Earth. Scientists, doctors, engineers, and military officers sat at tables covered with papers and computer screens. They had been working for 3 weeks straight to build something that had never been tried before. Show me what you have, Jake said to Dr. Lisa Carter, who was standing next to a large machine that filled half the room. The machine looked like a mix between a medical scanner and a computer. It had a bed in the middle where a person could lie down, surrounded by metal rings covered in blinking lights. Thick cables connected it to dozens of computers that were making humming sounds. We call it the Human Replication Protocol, Lisa said. It uses the quantum structures in human DNA to create an exact copy of a person, including all their memories and knowledge. Jake walked around the machine, looking at all the parts, and this actually works. In theory, yes, said Dr. Ben Hayes, who was checking numbers on one of the computers. We've tested it with small samples of human tissue, and the quantum copying process works perfectly. But we've never tried it on a whole person. That's where I come in, said Marine Sergeant Dan Brooks, who was sitting on a chair next to the machine. Dan was a big man with short hair and scars on his hands from years of military training. I volunteered to be the first test. Jake looked at Dan. Are you sure about this, Sergeant? We don't know what could go wrong. Dan stood up and smiled. Sir, if this machine can make 2 of me, then we have twice as many soldiers. If it can, make 100 of me. We have 100 times more soldiers. I've been fighting for my country my whole life. Now I can fight for my planet. Lisa checked the readings on her computer one more time. All the equipment is ready, Commander. The quantum field generators are working properly, and the consciousness transfer systems are online. Jake nodded. Then, let's make history. Dan lay down on the bed in the middle of the machine. Lisa and Ben attached sensors to his head and arms. The sensors would monitor his brain activity and make sure the copying process worked correctly. How do you feel, Don? Lisa asked. Ready to meet myself, Don said, trying to make a joke even though Jake could see he was nervous. Ben pressed buttons on his computer and the machine began to hum louder. The metal rings around Dan started spinning slowly, and the lights on them became brighter. Quantum field is building, Ben said. Consciousness mapping is beginning. On the computer screens around the room, Jake could see patterns that looked like maps of Dan's brain. Lines and shapes moved across the screens as the machine studied every part of Dan's mind and body. This is incredible, Lisa said, watching her screen. The machine is reading his memories, his skills, even his personality. It's like making a perfect map of everything that makes Dan who he is. The process took 2 hours. Jake watched the screens and listened to the machine's hum while Don lay still on the bed. Finally, Ben looked up from his computer. Consciousness mapping is complete, Ben said, beginning physical replication now. A second bed rose up from the floor next to the first one. This bed was empty, but as Jake watched, something began to appear on it. First, it was just a faint outline, like a shadow. Then, slowly, the shadow became more solid. "It's working," Lisa whispered. The shape on the second bed became clearer and clearer until DJ could see that it was another person. The person looked exactly like Dan, down to the same scars on his hands and the same short haircut. After another hour, the machine stopped humming. The lights on the metal rings went back to their normal brightness. Ben checked his computers and nodded. "Replication complete," Ben said. "All readings are normal." The second Dan opened his eyes and sat up on his bed. He looked around the room, seeing all the same people that the first Dan could see. "How do you feel?" Lisa asked the second Dan. "Strange," the second Dan said. "I remember lying down on the bed, but I also remember appearing on this bed. It's like I have two sets of memories for the same time." The first Dan sat up on his bed and looked at his copy. "This is weird. I can feel what he's feeling. When he moves his hand, I can feel my hand wanting to move too." Jake stared at the two identical men. "Are you both Dan Brooks?" "Yes," both Dans said at the same time. Then they looked at each other and laughed. "We're the same person," the first Dan said, "but we're also two different people. I know that doesn't make sense, but that's how it feels." Ben was studying the readings on his computers. "This is amazing." Their brain patterns are synchronized through quantum entanglement. They share the same consciousness, but they can also think independently. "What does that mean for fighting?" Jake asked. The second Dan stood up and walked to the other side of the room. "Watch this," he said. He picked up a pen from a table and wrote something on a piece of paper. At the same time, the first Dan closed his eyes. He wrote "quantum soldiers" on the paper. The first Dan said, even though he could not see what the second Dan had written. "They share knowledge instantly," Lisa said. "Anything one of them learns, the other one knows immediately." Jake felt excitement building in his chest. "So if we train one Dan in a new fighting technique, both Dans will know it." "Not just both," Ben said. "If we make more copies, they'll all share the same knowledge. Every Dan we create will know everything that every other Dan learns." Over the next week, Jake authorized the creation of more copies. They made 10 Dans, then 50, then 100. Each new Dan had all the memories and skills of the original, plus everything new that all the other Dans had learned. Colonel Nancy White was put in charge of training the replicated soldiers. She set up training centers where the Dans could practice new fighting techniques and learn to use new weapons. "This is unlike anything I've ever seen," Nancy told Jake as they watched a group of Dans practicing combat moves. "When one Dan learns a new technique, I can see all the other Dans immediately know how to do it too. They don't need to practice it themselves." But the most amazing thing happened when the Dans started working together in groups. Jake watched as 20 Dans planned an attack on a practice target. They did not need to talk to each other or give orders. They all knew what the others were, thinking and moved together like parts of the same machine. "It's like they have one brain spread across 20 bodies," Amy Rogers said. Amy had been put in charge of military strategy for the replicated army. "Can we make copies of other people too?" Jake asked Lisa. "We've tried," Lisa said. "The process works, but not as well as it does with Dan. It seems like some people's quantum structures are stronger than others. Dan's are unusually strong, which is why his copies work so well together. So we need to test other soldiers to see who else can be replicated successfully," Jake said. "Exactly. We're working on that now." Meanwhile, some of the coalition aliens who had come to Earth to observe the project were not happy with what they saw. Ambassador Vex visited the training center and watched the Dans working together. After an hour, the crystal alien asked to speak with Jake privately. "Commander Morrison, what your people are doing disturbs us," Ambassador Vex said. "You are creating copies of consciousness. This seems wrong to us." "Why?" Jake asked. "The copies are still human. They still have free will and can make their own choices." "But they are not natural," Ambassador Vex said. "In our culture, consciousness is sacred. Each individual should exist only once. Jake thought about this. With respect, Ambassador, your culture never faced the threat of complete extinction. We're doing what we have to do to survive. But what if you create too many copies? What if the copies decide they don't want to follow orders? What if they think they should be in charge instead of the originals? Jake had wondered about the same things. We've thought about that. But every Dan we've created still has the same values and beliefs as the original Dan. They want to protect Earth just as much as he does. Ambassador Vex was quiet for a moment. I hope you are right, Commander. Because if you are wrong, you may have created a bigger problem than the... After the ambassador left, Jake went to find the original Dan. He found him in the training center, working with 50 of his copies to practice a new battle formation. Dan, can I ask you something? Jake said. Sure, Commander, Dan said. All of me is listening. Do you ever feel like the copies should be treated differently than the original? Do any of them think they should be in charge? Dan thought about the question. Sir, every copy of me remembers being the original. We all remember volunteering for this experiment. We all remember wanting to protect Earth. So no, none of us thinks we're better than the others. We're all the same person, just in different bodies. And you're all willing to fight and possibly die for Earth. Yes, sir, Don said. All of us. Jake nodded. In 6 weeks, the Kreth would arrive at Earth. When they got here, they would expect to find a small planet with a weak military. Instead, they would find an army that could think as one while fighting as many. Jake smiled. Maybe humanity had a chance after all. The space around Jupiter was filled with more ships than had ever been seen in the solar system before. Admiral Paul Grant stood on the bridge of his flagship Unity, looking at the screens that showed thousands of human ships spread out in formation. Each ship was commanded by a copy of someone from Earth's military, and all of them were connected through quantum consciousness. Enemy ships detected at the edge of the system called out Lieutenant Karen Price from her position at the sensor station. 2 million Kreth vessels approaching Jupiter orbit. Paul nodded. He had expected this. The Kreth always attacked with overwhelming numbers, but today they would find out that numbers alone might not be enough. All ships, prepare for battle, Paul said into his communication device. Remember, everything we learn here will be shared. Instantly, with our copies back on Earth, fight smart, fight together, and show these aliens what humans can do. On the Kreth command ship, Fleet Commander Kex was studying the readings from his sensors. The information confused him. The small planet called Earth was supposed to have only a few thousand ships, but his sensors showed tens of thousands of human vessels. How is this possible? Kex asked, his second in command. Our intelligence reports said this species had a very small military. Perhaps they built more ships after we sent our message, suggested the second commander. Many species try to build up their forces when they know we are coming. Kex was not convinced. The humans had only known about the Kreth for a few months. It was impossible to build so many ships in such a short time, but it did not matter. The Kreth had 2 million ships, and even if the humans had built more vessels, they could not have built enough to match Kreth numbers. Begin the attack, Kex ordered. Take samples of their technology and biology for replication. We will learn what makes these humans think they can fight us. The battle began when the Kreth ships fired their first weapons at the human fleet. The human ships fired back, and space around Jupiter became filled with bright lights from explosions and laser beams. Paul watched from the Unity as his ships fought against the Kreth forces. The enemy ships were exactly as Steve Miller had described them. They looked like they were made of bone and metal, and they moved in ways that seemed impossible for normal spacecraft. Admiral, the Kreth are using some kind of biological technology, reported Commander Tony Clark from the ship Liberty. Their ships are healing themselves when we damage them. Confirmed, said Captain Helen Ross from the ship Freedom. I just watched a Kreth ship regrow its entire front section after we blew it off. Paul was not surprised. The reports from other coalition battles had mentioned that Kreth technology could repair itself, but he had a plan for dealing with that. All ships switched to pattern Alpha 7, Paul ordered. Hit them with everything at once. Don't give them time to heal. The human ships changed their attack pattern. Instead of fighting the Kreth ships one at a time, they began working together to focus all their weapons on single targets. When 20 human ships fired at one Kreth ship at the same time, the enemy vessel was destroyed completely before it could heal itself. But the Kreth were learning to, after losing several ships to the new human tactics, they began to adapt. Kex watched as his ships started copying the human attack patterns, using the same focused fire techniques against the human fleet. Interesting, Kex said to himself. These humans are more clever than most species we have fought, but they cannot adapt faster than we can copy their ideas. The Kreth ships began winning more battles as they used the human tactics against the humans. Several human ships were destroyed, and Kex ordered his forces to collect the wreckage and any human bodies they could find. Paul watched on his screens as Kreth ships began studying the destroyed human vessels. He knew what would happen next. The Kreth would copy human technology and use it to build new weapons, but Paul was counting on this. Phase 2, Paul said into his communication device. All ships, execute protocol, Mirror. Suddenly, every human ship in the fleet began changing its tactics. The focused fire attack stopped, and the human ships began using completely new fighting techniques that none of them had used before. On the Kreth command ship, Kex was confused. His ships had just learned to copy the human attack patterns, but now the humans were fighting in completely different ways. What are they doing? Kex asked his officers. Why did they change their tactics? Unknown, Commander, replied his second in command. Our replication systems are trying to adapt to their new methods, but they keep changing faster than we can copy them. What Kex did not understand was that the human ships were not just individual vessels with separate crews. Every human commander was connected to every other human commander through quantum consciousness. When one commander learned that the Kreth were copying their tactics, all the commanders knew it instantly. They could change their entire battle plan in seconds, something that had never happened in any previous battle the Kreth had fought. The battle continued for hours every time the Kreth adapted to a human tactic. The humans immediately switched to something new. The Kreth ships that had been built to copy and adapt to enemy strategies found themselves fighting an enemy that evolved faster than they could copy. Paul coordinated the battle from the Unity, but he was not giving orders in the traditional way. Instead, he was sharing his thoughts directly with all the other human commanders. When he had an idea for a new attack pattern, every commander knew it immediately. When Captain Ross discovered a weakness in a Kreth ship design, every human ship began exploiting that weakness within seconds. Admiral, the Kreths are trying something new, reported Commander Clark. They're sending boarding parties to some of our ships. They want to capture living humans. Paul was not worried about this. Let them try. All crews, prepare for close combat. The Kreth soldiers that boarded the human ships were in for a surprise. They expected to fight against normal human soldiers, but instead they found themselves fighting against replicated humans who shared all their combat knowledge with each other. When a Kreth soldier used a new fighting technique against one human, every other human in the battle immediately knew how to defend against that technique. When a human discovered a weakness in Kreth armor, every human fighter instantly knew how to exploit it. But the biggest surprise came when the Kreth tried to replicate the captured humans. The Kreth had perfected the art of copying the biological and technological aspects of their enemy, but they had never encountered quantum consciousness before. On the Kreth command ship, the replication technicians were having problems. Commander Kex, we cannot replicate the human prisoners, reported the chief technician. Their biological structures are normal, but there is something else, something we cannot copy. What do you mean? Kex demanded. The humans have quantum structures in their brains that we do not understand when we try to replicate them. We can copy their bodies perfectly, but the copies have no consciousness. They are like empty shells. Kex stared at the report. For the first time in Kreth history, they had encountered an enemy they could not replicate. The human prisoners they had captured were useless for creating new soldiers. Back in the battle, Paul was watching the Kreth ships begin to retreat toward the outer edges of the Jupiter system. The enemy fleet was still much larger than the human fleet, but they were no longer winning battles as easily as they had expected. Admiral, we're receiving a communication from the Kreth command ship, reported Lieutenant Price. Put it on screen, Paul ordered. The face of Fleet Commander Kex appeared on the bridge screens. The alien looked angry and confused. Human Commander, what are you? Kex demanded. Your species is not in our database. You fight in ways we have never seen. You adapt faster than we can replicate your strategies. Paul smiled. We're humans, Commander, and we don't give up easily. This is not, Overkeck said. We will study your tactics and return with new strategies. No species has ever defeated the Kreth Empire. Maybe not, Paul said, but no species has ever fought like humans either. The Kreth fleet began to move away from Jupiter, heading toward the outer solar system. But Paul knew they would be back. The first battle was over, but the war was just beginning. Paul opened a communication channel to Earth. Commander Morrison, this is Admiral Grant. The Kreth have retreated from Jupiter orbit. We won the first battle on Earth. Jake Morrison felt relief wash over him. The quantum consciousness experiment had worked better than anyone had hoped. The Kreth had expected to fight against a normal species with normal military tactics. Instead, they had encountered an enemy that could think as one while fighting as many. Good work, Admiral, Jake said. But stay alert. I don't think they're done with us yet. Paul looked at the screens showing the retreating Kreth fleet. No, sir, I don't think they are either. But now they know that Earth isn't going to be an easy target. The first battle between humanity and the Kreth Empire was over. For the first time since they had begun their conquest, the Kreth had been forced to retreat. But both sides knew that the real war was just beginning. 3 weeks after the battle at Jupiter, Ambassador Vex arrived at Earth with news that would change everything. The crystal alien stood in the command center with Jake Morrison and the other human leaders, her body glowing brighter than usual with excitement. Commander Morrison, what your people did at Jupiter has spread throughout the entire galaxy, Ambassador Vex said. For the first time in over 50 years, the Kreth Empire has been forced to retreat from a battle. Every species in the coalition is talking about humanity. Jake felt proud but also worried. What does that mean for Earth? It means the Coalition Council wants to offer Earth not just membership, but a leadership position in galactic defense, Ambassador Vex replied. However, there is something else. The Kreth have sent a message to all Coalition worlds. They are gathering their entire Empire's fleet for one final attack on Earth. Double quotes. Dr. Lisa Carter looked up from her computer. How many ships are we talking about? Our intelligence suggests over 10 million vessels. Ambassador Vex said quietly, they are bringing forces from every world they have conquered. This will be the largest military operation in galactic history. Jake felt his stomach drop. Even with the replicated human fleet, 10 million ships was an impossible number to fight against. However, Ambassador Vex continued, the Coalition has a proposal. Instead of just trying to protect Earth, we want to learn your replication technology. If we can teach other species to use quantum consciousness like humans do, we might be able to create a galactic defense force that can finally stop the Kreth permanently. Dr. Ben Hayes stepped forward. We've been working on that, but it's not simple. Each species has different brain structures. The quantum consciousness process has to be adapted for each type of alien. How long would that take? Jake asked. For 1 or 2 species, maybe a few weeks, Ben said. But to teach the entire coalition, that could take months or years. We don't have months, Jake said. The Kreth will be here soon. That evening, Jake called a meeting with all the human military leaders. They gathered in the war room where maps of the solar system covered the walls. Jake looked around at the faces of the people who would have to find a way to save not just Earth, but the entire galaxy. We need ideas, Jake said. How do we fight 10 million ships? Captain Amy Rogers stood up. We could use the same tactics that worked at Jupiter, but on a larger scale. Make more copies of our best soldiers and commanders. We're already doing that, said Colonel Nancy White. We now have over 1 million replicated soldiers and 10,000 replicated ship commanders. But even if we triple that number, we'll still be outnumbered 100 to 1. Admiral Paul Grant, who had returned to Earth after the Jupiter battle, looked at the star maps. What if we don't try to fight all 10 million ships at once? What if we force them to fight us in smaller groups? How would we do that? Jake asked. The Kreth have to travel through hyperspace to get here, Paul explained. There are only a few hyperspace routes that lead to Earth. If we can block most of those routes and force them to come through just 1 or 2 passages, We can fight smaller numbers of ships at a time. Ben Hayes had been quiet during the meeting, but now he stood up with an excited look on his face. I have a different idea. What if we don't just defend Earth? What if we attack their home worlds while they're attacking us? Explain, Jake said. If the Kreth are bringing their entire fleet to attack Earth, that means their home worlds are not well defended, Ben said. We could send replicated forces to attack Kreth planets while their main fleet is here. They would have to choose between conquering Earth and protecting their own empire. Lisa Carter nodded. That could work, but we would need ships that can travel very far, very fast. And we would need commanders who know how to fight on alien planets. We have quantum consciousness, Amy Rogers said. Every replicated human can share knowledge instantly. If one group learns how to fight on a Kreth world, every other group will know how to do it too. Jake looked at the star maps again. So we're talking about fighting a war on multiple fronts across the galaxy? That's never been tried before. Humans have never existed before, Paul said. At least, not humans with quantum consciousness. We can coordinate military operations across the entire galaxy in real time. No other species has ever been able to do that. Over the next 4 weeks, Earth became the center of the largest military operation in galactic history. Ships arrived from every coalition world, bringing volunteers who wanted to learn the human replication process. The training centers that had been built for human soldiers were expanded to accommodate dozens of different alien species. Ben and Lisa worked day and night to adapt the quantum consciousness technology for other species. They discovered that while most aliens could not replicate as perfectly as humans, they could still share knowledge and coordinate their actions through quantum links. The Jeltari crystal aliens were especially good at quantum consciousness because their bodies were already partly made of quantum crystals. The Velton bird-like aliens could use quantum links to coordinate flying formations across entire solar systems. The Gordic insect aliens could connect their hive minds to the quantum network, creating superintelligent battle groups. This is incredible, Lisa told Jake as they watched alien soldiers practicing with their human instructors. Each species brings different advantages to the quantum network. The humans provide creativity and adaptability. The Jeltari provide computational power. The Veltons provide speed and coordination. And the Gordics provide analytical thinking. So instead of just having a human army with quantum consciousness, we have a galactic army where every species contributes their best abilities, Jake said. Exactly. And all of them can share their knowledge instantly with each other. 2 months after the Jupiter battle, the Kreth fleet arrived at the edge of the solar system. Fleet Commander Kex commanded the largest armada in Kreth history. 10 million ships spread across space in a formation that stretched from one side of the solar system to the other. This time we will not be surprised, Kex told his commanders. We have studied the human tactics from the Jupiter battle. We know how they coordinate their forces. We will overwhelm them with pure numbers. But when the Kreth fleet approached Earth, they found something they had not expected. Instead of just human ships defending the planet, there were vessels from every species in the coalition, and all of them were fighting with the same coordinated tactics that the humans had used at Jupiter. How is this possible? Kex demanded as he watched the battle unfold on his screens. The other coalition species do not have the same abilities as humans. Commander, we are receiving reports from our home worlds, said his communications officer. We are under attack. Human forces have appeared at 17 different Kreth planets. Kex stared at the reports while he had been gathering his entire fleet to attack Earth. The humans had been preparing to attack Kreth territory. But how could they coordinate attacks across such vast distances? The answer came when Kex tried to communicate with his forces at the homeworlds. The communications took hours to reach across the galaxy, but the human forces seemed to know about changes in the battle at Earth within minutes. They have some form of instant communication, Kex realized. They can coordinate their entire war effort in real time across the galaxy. For the first time in Kreth history, they were fighting an enemy that could think and act faster than they could. Every time the Kreth adapted to human tactics in one location, the humans had already changed their strategy in 10 other locations. The battle lasted for 3 days. The Kreth fought harder than they had ever fought before, but they were fighting an enemy unlike anything they had ever encountered. The coalition forces led by humans did not just defend single planets. They fought as one massive organism spread across the entire galaxy. On the third day, Kex received a communication from the human commander at Earth. Kreth Commander, this is Admiral Grant of the Galactic Defense Force, Paul said. Your empire is defeated. Your homeworlds are under coalition control, and your fleet is surrounded. We offer you a choice. Surrender now, and your people will be allowed to join the galactic community as equals. Continue fighting, and your empire will be destroyed completely. Kex looked at the reports from across his empire. The humans were right. The Kreth had lost not just the battle for Earth, but the war for their entire civilization. How did you do this? Kex asked. How did one small planet defeat an empire that conquered 17 worlds? We didn't do it alone, Paul replied. We did it together. That's something your empire never learned. When people work together instead of conquering each other, they become stronger than any conqueror. Kex ordered his fleet to surrender. The war that had threatened to destroy the galaxy was over. 6 months later, Jake Morrison stood in the new Galactic Defense Academy on Earth. Students from over 30 different species were learning to use quantum consciousness technology. The Academy had become the most important school in the galaxy, teaching beings from across the stars how to work together instead of fighting each other. Ambassador Vex approached Jake as he watched a class of mixed-species students practicing coordinated battle tactics. Earth has become the center of galactic civilization, Ambassador Vex said.